It's time for My Virtual Jericho with John Mair, live.
Hello, welcome to the autumn run of My Jericho, the first virtual My Jericho of the season. There's going to be plenty more between now and Christmas. If you want to find out more, go to the website, myjericho.co.uk. There are live events, lots of them, and a few virtual events. Now, nothing divides Jericho and Oxford more than the issue of traffic. It's how you control cars and in the city. And there are now some LTNs in East Oxford, and they are causing, how should we say, a bit of fraction. The massive local rows with taxi drivers and others taking up the baton against the low traffic neighbourhoods. Here's one of their diagrams about all the trouble it caused. They show the depth of feeling. Bollards have been removed, signs deface. It's close to civil war off the Cowley Road. If the Walton Street barrier, if we come back to me, it was removed 18 months ago. That provided a petri dish for trying out low traffic solutions here. It failed for a variety of reasons. Some of them were self-inflicted. That was under the previous Tory administration of the county, the wonderful councillor Yvonne Constance. Since it's been all change at County Hall, Labour, the Green Party, Liberal Democrats now in control. Tonight's My Jericho Question Time puts a new traffic supremo, Councillor Andrew Gant, on the spot. He'll outline his dream for the Oxford traffic and later be cross-examined by those with an interest. We've also got Bernadette from the Jericho Traders Association, Patrick Davey from the Berners Road Residents Association, representing real people, Gowher Rizvi. What's proposed? In brief, let's have a look at what the County Council is proposing. They're proposing what they call 6 bus gates. They call them traffic filters around the city, which will stop all but local and vital traffic coming into the city. If you're a car driver, you will need a permit to pass through them for up to 100 days. Buses, emergency vehicles, and delivery vehicles will be exempt. In essence, it's a porous version of the London congestion charging scheme, which has worked well for over 2 decades. Our nearest traffic filter here in Jericho will be in Hyde Bridge Street and operate from 7 till 7, 7 days a week. The consultation hold scheme ends at the weekend. If it goes ahead, the bus gates, or traffic filters, will be in place next summer. Now to Andrew Gant. He's the second traffic supremo in the county hot seat in the last year. Andrew, what are your plans?
Well, thank you very much, John, and thank you very much for your welcome. It's very good to be joining you and talking to people in Jericho. It's always nice to do these things in person, but online is a second best that we've all got used to. So just to pick up on a couple of points you said there, if I may, just to begin with, John. First of all, you used the phrase that the traffic filters, and that's the term that we prefer. Bus gate. A gate is something you shut. A filter is something that you can use to decide what can go through and when. You said will stop traffic coming into the city. That's not correct. What they will do is stop certain kinds of traffic going through the city. It is not about preventing anybody getting to where they want to go by whatever means they want, whenever they want. What it's about is stopping people driving through streets which would be better without through traffic. That is the basic point of it. Also, just on a small factual point, you said the consultation ends this weekend. It has in fact been extended by 10 days because of the period of mourning for Her Majesty the Queen. So it ends on October the 13th, not on the 3rd as originally advertised. You asked me to give a bit of an overview, so I'll just sort of start by putting this in context. I've been a member of Oxford City Council, not the Transport Authority, since 2014, representing Summertown, and since boundary changes, the ward known as Cllr and Sunnymead, and of the County Council since May 2021, representing Wolvercote and Summertown, and a member of the Cabinet only since May of this year. So I'm still very new, and obviously have inherited a large number of policy areas. You described me as the traffic supremo, which sounds terribly grand. My job title is Cabinet Member for Highways Management, and responsibility for these policies is kind of divided deliberately between myself and Councillor Duncan Enright and Councillor Pete Sudbury, to bring sort of different perspectives, and also the three parties which make up the Oxfordshire Fair Deal Alliance, which, by the way, is working extremely well. The Alliance has been very clear about its priorities. We've set out a hierarchy for transport planning. We've published the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan. The policies have a great deal of synergy with what the previous administration was doing. You mentioned Councillor Yvonne Constance, who led on this very boldly and publicly. And the schemes that we are bringing forward as part of the core schemes are indeed inherited and have been talked about for a long time. There have been changes made to them, as everybody will know. So why? You talked about the vision. What is this all about? Well, the basic fact is that car use has, according to some reports, and you can look at the data on this, doubled since the 1980s. The capacity of Oxford streets, which is of course a medieval city divided by two large rivers with not very many crossing points, has not. There are too many cars in the city. You'll find very few people who disagree with that statement. So it's therefore the job, and indeed the duty, of the Highways Authority to take a view on what the streets are for, and how the city will perform best for all of its residents, its businesses, its visitors, its students, its old people, its young people, not just now, but in the decades to come. And that is what the priorities of the Alliance are intending to do. Our city centre is not working as it should. Arrangements for tourists are poor. Satisfaction levels among tourists are poor. Return levels for tourists are poor. That has a direct effect on the economy. And a good part of the reason for that is that the facilities, the amenities, the layout, the getting around the city centre is not what it should be. And to me, a key part of managing the transport better is to free up our historic and beautiful spaces in order to make them work better. And we've made a good start on that on Broad Street, as everybody will know. There are very many moving parts in transport policy. And one thing that I have learnt very quickly in my time in the Cabinet is that not all of them are under the direct control in terms of timing and budget of the Highways Authority. Indeed, in practice, very few of them are. For example, the government made its active travel funds available as an emergency measure during COVID. And of course, we wanted to bid for those and make a success of them, which we have done. School streets is a policy that we've brought forward. Broad Street is a policy that we've brought forward. Working closely with the bus companies, the timing around the Zebra bid, which will allow them to spend £89 million on a fleet of brand new electric buses. The timing of that was set by government. In the middle of all of this, Network Rail have decided that now is the moment to rebuild the station and rebuild the Botley Road Bridge. That is absolutely brilliant and will be transformational for our city. But I won't pretend that it doesn't add complications when one of your main routes into the city will be seriously disrupted by an absolutely enormous engineering project. So we've got what we called the core schemes, used to be known as Connecting Oxford, with the three main elements: the 6 traffic filters, which have been decoupled in terms of time from the other 2 and are coming forward. As you know, there's a consultation going on now with a view to implementation in August of next year. The other 2 are the zero emission zone and the workplace parking levy. Those are still absolutely part of the ambition. They should very much be read together, but they are not being brought forward at the same time for various complicated technical reasons. We are also consulting at the same time on the Central Oxfordshire Transport Plan, which is the first part of rolling out the effect of these plans to the wider area around Oxford. I'm sure everybody here knows what is in those plans, so I won't go into them. But I will just finish, if I may, by just referring to something that happened just yesterday, which is a good example of how there are many, many different schemes in play. And this was a debate at the Future Oxfordshire Partnership around allocation of funding within the remaining few months of the growth deal. again, a scheme whose timing and budget is set by government, not by us. There was a vote at the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. One of the results of that vote is that money has been allocated to a potential cycling and pedestrian bridge over the Thames between Oaseneymead and Oxpens. Perhaps of more direct interest to North Oxford is that everybody will know that significant improvements to Woodstock Road were part of that scheme. A scheme was designed and went out for consultation, and then the funding, as it came under pressure, was withdrawn. Um, as a result of yesterday's vote, there will be £4 million of growth deal money available to make immediate improvements to the Woodstock Road. Having lived in Summertown for over 20 years, it's something I've been campaigning for all that time. The fact that we don't have a joined up cycle lane that even goes to the gates of the primary schools on the road is frankly a scandal. That will now happen, and I am absolutely thrilled about that. In addition, there are moves to developing a North Oxford strategy to really think carefully about the performance of transport in our sector of the city, about the crossroads, and about how the impact of developments further to the north can be accommodated. It's a complex picture. I look forward very much to hearing your views.
Andrew, how is the filters going to work? Explain it to me in layman's terms.
The traffic filters?
Yes, please.
Sure. So the proposal is in the consultation. I'm quite sure everybody here has seen it. And I would just stress, it is a proposal. So do please let us know what you think. The proposal as it stands at the moment is that there are 6, 4 in the city centre, and then 2 a little bit further out, one on Holloway, one on Marston Ferry Road. The 2 further out ones will operate 6 days a week. The inner ones 7 days a week, in both cases 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. And there is a range of exemptions in order to try and make business which relies on cars work successfully, and of course to allow mobility for people who need it, such as blue badge holders, care workers, that kind of thing. And there is also a proposal for passes, essentially exemptions for residents up to a certain number, 100 per vehicle, up to 3 per household. Those are the basic headlines of the scheme as proposed at the moment.
So the Hyde Bridge Road traffic filter, how will that work? Who will it stop coming into Worcester Street and Beaumont Street?
Well, it will stop traffic which might have in the past driven in from the west of the city and gone through the city in order to get somewhere else. That's the basic point.
So people who are trying to go through, what about locals? They'll have passes for 100 days a year. Any other exceptions made?
Well, that's what the proposal says at the moment, and it may well be that that the consultation responses will form part of a report which goes to cabinet in November. It's entirely possible that there might be changes proposed to that. I have no knowledge of that at all at the moment, but that is possible. But that is the proposal as it is at the moment. Yes.
There was a hell of a row over the closure of Walton Street, and it was virtually Jericho's civil war. How are you going to avoid that this time around?
Well, I mean, obviously that was under the previous administration, and it happened, of course, for very different reasons and with very different consequences. So, yes, of course, I hope we will avoid a civil war, and that's exactly what meetings like this and public consultation are there for, to try and explain, how the Alliance sees the issues in the city, what our proposals are to do about it, and to get a response.
How do you read the public mood on the traffic filters so far?
Well, I'd probably better not comment, to be honest, John, and I hope you won't find that a bit of a politician's answer. But, the consultation is live. I honestly have no idea what responses are coming back. I don't know. Our technical people will look at them when they come in. I mean, obviously, I talk to people on the street and on the doorstep all the time. there are issues that are emerging. It's very interesting. People have views about the numbers of exemptions, about the type of exemptions. There's about whether the vehicles that are proposed to be exempt is the right list, whether it's too big, whether it's too small, whether the number per household is right or wrong. There's also there's an issue about the geographical area of the residence permits, and clearly, if you allocate anything on the basis of a geographical area, it is going to have a boundary where somebody's going to be inside and somebody's going to be outside, and you will leave yourself open to the charge that that is unfair. So that's a difficult balancing act, but those are the kinds of things that people are talking about. Interestingly, I would say rather more than the basic principle.
Now you're sitting on top of a time bomb in East Oxford. There is civil war in East Oxford. People are putting up bollards. People are defacing signs. It's taxi drivers versus the world. How do you solve a problem like that?
Well, we're working on that. That is in my portfolio. I mean, that is a separate policy strand. I made a statement about that at the cabinet meeting on the 19th of July, when I'd been in post for a few weeks and had inherited that situation. We are actively working on it. I was in Temple Cowley this morning talking to a local councillor and to a local resident, working up what I promised on the 19th of July, which is to bring forward a scheme of potential changes and mitigations in order to address some of the issues that Cowley LTN has thrown up by spring of next year. And I've got a whole series of those meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks to do that. The East Oxford LTN is at a very different stage of its life. It's it's still only in the first few months. It's on an ETRO, which is a legal instrument which has a 6-month review point. So clearly that will be the point to look carefully at what's going on. What you say about civil war, I mean, people in a democracy are perfectly entitled to express themselves in whatever way they choose, and I fully, will back to the death their right to do that. My job is to listen to to reasoned and sensible argument, and to try and extract from all the noise around it what is actually sensible, constructive contributions to the debate that will help us deliver the best possible outcome. And I've said this before and I'll say it again: vandalism and criminal damage are not part of that debate.
So, okay, now let's bring it down to Jericho. Bring it down to Walton Street. The barrier's gone. Some people say the traffic is bad or worse than ever. There are no 20 signs on the road on the road itself. There are very few 20 signs, very few flashing signs. What relief can you offer people in Jericho there?
Yeah, well, I mean, Walton Street was closed, by accident because the road fell in. um, there is no proposal on the table to close Walton Street. There's been a barrier further up on Kingston Road for a long time, of course, and I don't think anybody's proposing to pull that out and make the whole Walton Street up to Bainton Road a through road again. Um, uh, the basic purpose of the traffic filters is to reduce through traffic. So the hope and the modelling is that will deliver a better environment across the city. But I'll be very interested to find out, from this afternoon and from anybody else, if you think there are specific issues or specific interventions in your area that would help deliver a better result for you. I mean, I've spoken to Bernadette and her colleagues. I've spoken to Patrick. Very articulate spokespeople for their own particular view, and that's great. That's really helpful.
But how do you mitigate traffic in Walton Street? How do you keep it to 20, which it isn't quite often now?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say mitigate, I mean two separate things. The sort of total quantum of traffic. The main policy there is the traffic filters. The idea is to reduce traffic overall. That's the basic point. Okay, and the model shows that it will do that. And obviously, you have to wait and see if it actually works because a model is only a model. In terms of speed, yeah, it's a constant challenge. Is how to enforce it. Was on a meeting this morning talking about the 20-mile-an-hour scheme, which is a key flagship policy of this council, is to introduce 20-mile-an-hour limits to communities that ask for them, and frankly they all have. It's been an amazing response. Pretty much every town and village across Oxfordshire has asked for this. But enforcement is an issue. You can't realistically expect the hard pressed police to do more than occasional spot checks on it. So things like calming measures, which of course you have in Jericho, are part of the solution. Occasional enforcement is part of the solution. But in the end, the law is the law, and I take the view that it is legitimate to expect people to obey the law, frankly.
Okay, you've probably heard enough from me. And Bernadette, would you like to question Councillor Gant on his plans?
Okay, yeah, thank you both for having me along. So just a very quick one on what you were mentioning about speed restrictions on Walton Street. And I noticed that people are speeding, and something that we have all agreed on, all of the groups, so which is the Anchor Forum, which is the businesses and the residents coming together, is that we all would like to stop people cutting through. Obviously, legitimate people, genuine destination Jericho people who are coming to visit and to use our businesses would be very welcome. But schemes for traffic calming, which could involve chicanes, and I believe they're called traffic tables. And there are a whole lot of people in our community who've been working on that and discussing that, and we've also been involved in that. So to make Jericho not a shortcut, but still a destination, so people still can come through. And so it would be a bit more like, say, Marylebone High Street, where people can't get up speed because there are multiple pedestrian crossings and narrowings of the road and that kind of thing. So just, we all support that. And, that's something that we've all been working on, and, we can send to you, Andrew, as a community. But I've got lots of questions, but one of them, which I have been asked to ask on behalf of other people, is the monitoring of the schemes. So if the bus gates do go ahead, obviously we've been through the traumatic time of Walton Street being closed and the impact it had on trade being suppressed for most of the Jericho businesses. And so in Jericho, there's a sort of flow to it. And as you probably know, it empties out somewhat in the summer. And then it's sort of in September, about 2 weeks ago, things pick up. And unless there are any variables such as, lockdowns or anything like that, it's a flow which happens every year. So if the bus gates did go in sometime in August next year, and then come this time in 2023, it doesn't pick up and the customers don't come back and it doesn't all spark back into life again, what would we do as Jericho businesses in terms of, obviously, we're worried about the impact of the bus gates, and just, in East Oxford. So we had a meeting with some East Oxford business owners last week, and we were asked to ask this: can you please ask Andrew Gant about Magdalen Road? We've all had a bad summer here. There's no one around and it's like a ghost town. It was never like this before the LTNs. Can you ask if someone senior is in the council is going to come and visit us? So that's, they're kind of ahead of us in the timeline. They already had their, the LTNs installed, and they are all saying that they have been, trade is being suppressed in East Oxford, but they're finding that they're not being monitored, and they are struggling because of the LTNs, and they aren't having any response from the council. So there's some kind of mechanism.
You got two questions. One about Jericho and the bus gates, will it pick up? And the other one about Magdalen Road. Andrew, do you want to answer the one about picking up next September?
Yeah, sure. Well, the traffic filters are planned to go in under an ETRO, and as I'm sure you know, that's an experimental traffic regulation order, which is monitoring a scheme in real time. That's what it is. So you monitor it and you consult on it as it performs. Now, obviously the council has done everything it possibly can on modelling and is pursuing a policy, which we hope and believe will be successful. But it is open to a future council to change it, or to pull it out if it chooses to. So yes, it will be monitored. That's for sure. And feedback from businesses, residents, and everybody else will be an absolutely key part of that.
A quick question, Andrew. What does your modelling say about the flow of traffic on High Bridge Road? How much will it be reduced by, thanks to traffic filters?
So it is. Now you're getting me to if you don't mind, if I can just put in a caveat about quoting the actual figures in front of me here, because I'm doing this in live time. But I believe the modelling shows a reduction in traffic of 20% overall and 30% in the city centre. But do please check that on the website to make sure that I'm giving you the correct figures. But I believe that's what it says.
Okay, Bernadette, you wanted to come back on something there? Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so the Cowley Road business owners and some on the Iffley Road and Magdalen Road, they are all feeling as though they've been left in limbo. So these traffic, the LTNs have been put in. There may have been a few local councillors who popped in to see the businesses. At the meeting I went to at the weekend, then overwhelmingly they are saying that the trade is down, and it's because of the LTNs which were put in May. And yet, so it doesn't make us feel reassured that we are going to be listened to in a similar way. If come September, October next year, things have quietened down substantially for us as a commercial area. So we're not reassured by what's happened in East Oxford.
Well, I mean, your first question was about senior people from the council going to the area. I mean, I'm going to Magdalen Road. I think it's next week, possibly the week after. To have exactly those conversations. What I've said to you already about the East Oxford LTN is that that there is a process, there is an ETRO which has time points in it, and we are working towards those. I mean, I'm not going to pretend here that this policy has been sweetness and light and everybody is dancing in the streets. Many people are, let's not forget that, but clearly there are issues that we as a highways authority need to address, and we are doing that.
If you read the comments section of the Oxford Mail, which of course is representative of no public opinion, they say you're anti-car, you hate car drivers, you hate taxi drivers. Is that true?
Well, is it true that it's not representative of public opinion? Those are your words, John. Look, come on. Look. This is an important point. Is about how we as an authority get a public response. I mean, I think we all know what the issues are with things like the comments section in the Oxford Mail. That is a self-selecting group. Many are anonymous. I read them sometimes. I find some of it useful. I find some of it abusive. I don't like people who hide behind anonymity in order to make claims that we have absolutely no idea who they're speaking for or who they are. I don't think that's a sensible contribution to the debate.
What about the opinion that you're anti-car and
Yeah,
pro?
not true. Absolutely not true. It's about taking a view on which particular kinds of streets work best in which particular kinds of ways. The purpose of an LTN, it's a low traffic neighborhood. The opposite of a low traffic neighborhood is a high traffic neighborhood. I get lots of correspondence, obviously from people who don't like the LTNs, but I get a great deal of correspondence from people saying things like, their children are able to walk to school, to cycle to school, to play in the streets. The air quality is better. These things are real. We have had children dying from asthma where the coroner has said that air quality was a contributory factor. We have to take these things seriously. The climate crisis is real. The increase in car use in our city is real. We have to deal with it. And it is legitimate to say, this is a street where people live. This is not a through street for people to drive through to get from one end of it to the other. That's what that policy is for. That is not anti-car. That is about your car is a legitimate tool to use for legitimate purposes in the right place. And that does not necessarily include using a residential street as a through street. And it does not stop anybody, driving to their home or to places that they need to be. What it does do is take through traffic out of streets where that is not appropriate. And the change has been transformational.
Bernadette, one more question from you, maybe.
Okay, so just from my point of view, everything sounds very grand and very impressive, but I think the human side of it all can be forgotten in terms of the entrepreneurs in Oxford. And I'm really proud, so proud of Jericho and all of my fellow business owners. And I've been a business owner in Oxford since 1989, and I've got several people I've known for many years in East Oxford, and these people are incredible, these entrepreneurs. And I do worry that they're seen as the businesses or the traders, and they're not seen as the sort of human stories which I'm hearing, literally almost every day, and sometimes several times a day, of people who are working on a month-by-month basis and paying this month's bills with last month's takings, and sometimes not able to pay themselves, heavy with debt. And one person I spoke to who has 2 businesses in Cowley Road, who says he cannot pay his staff now because and he said, I'm worried about losing my home. These are sort of individual stories, and this is carried through in Jericho with several people who were owing rent before lockdowns and are owing even more rent now. It's not, some businesses are doing really well. It's not specific. You can't generalize about them all, but these are all individual people who are very likely lying in bed worrying about having to look over our shoulders and worrying what the council is going to do to us next.
Is there a question in there? Sorry to interrupt you, Ben. Is there a question for
No, but just trying to give a sort of background and to for us to be seen as individuals rather than a sort of blanket people called the business. So that's all. Thank you, John.
No, it's all right. But Bernadette, Branca hasn't suffered there. I mean, your profits have gone up 50% every year during lockdown and during COVID.
Well, our restaurant was closed for however many months during lockdown. We're 54 businesses in Jericho, and many of the people who own the businesses are good friends of mine from way back in the 80s, and we spend time together socially. And all the businesses that some businesses are not doing that brilliantly in Jericho, although we don't have any empty units, and we don't we're not in need of any help from the council for regeneration, unlike some other shopping neighbourhoods. So it's about neighbours, and if one business is busy, others are more likely to also be busy because we're more of a destination.
Okay, Patrick Davey, you were rather articulate during the Walton Street closure. Questions for Councillor Gant?
Thanks, John, and thanks, Andrew, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. I just want to start with a couple of things. First of all, many thanks to the whole panel and John for organising this, and particularly Andrew for coming, who's clearly a very experienced councillor. And I think it's a really important point to make that councillors actually do the job, which is difficult. Because they want to make the city, their locality, a better place to live in. So I absolutely believe they're driven by the highest possible motives. And it is a difficult job. It's often done part-time with other competing interests. And it's challenging, and it's particularly challenging to balance different groups and interests and also perceptions. And of course, major decisions are often made by emotions as opposed to data. People have often made their mind up and then use the data to support or deny the hypothesis, as sadly the politics of the past few years shows us. But I do want to thank Andrew and the local politicians. And with that in mind, just a couple of things. The politicians can be misinformed, misled by the apparatus that they use. And in that, I want to just address John's comment that the Walton Street closure was controversial and it was a petri dish for a low traffic neighbourhood. And I believe that was not the case at all. It's really important to realise it was not a low traffic neighbourhood, sort of not in capitals and underlined. It was a sort of opportunistic road closure, and therefore it was a traffic displacement scheme, not an LTN. And the traffic was displaced into North Walton Street and South Walton Manor, creating, I'd like to say, a high traffic neighbourhood, but that's untrue. It was an ultra high traffic neighbourhood, and it was really toxic and unpleasant. And it was particularly unpleasant to actually people with protected characteristics. That is to say, we'll put the pandemic to one side, but those who stay at home during the day, who are often children, old folk, women, mothers. So it's particularly toxic to those people with protected characteristics. And one of the tragedies I found was the council at that time were fully aware of the consequences. In fact, when they closed the road, they'd done no modelling and they believed there would be no consequences. And I'll come back to why that's important. But they were fully aware of the consequences. And yet for 18 months, nothing happened to mitigate. And it was a terrible time. It was an absolutely terrible time. And sadly, the conclusion we as a group, and I represent Observatory, St Bernard's, Plantation and Leckford Road, we as a group drew was that the council didn't listen and weren't responsive. And, you know, once you've seen a leopard, you don't feel it changes its spots, because the track record is complete unresponsiveness. So that's the first question. The question, the question is: would you, Andrew, accept that most of the traffic departing via South Walton Street goes south and west, and therefore, if that traffic is not allowed to go there in proportion to not being allowed to go there, it will be diverted internally, largely internally, not entirely, but largely internally, up Walton Street into South Walton Manor and use the side roads to get out?
Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed for your introductory comment there, John. I do appreciate that. That's very generous of you. In terms of your comment there, you are the expert. You have done so much work on this and been very generous in sharing that work with me. So I think it would be presumptuous of me to question your data collection and your modelling. But I would just say perhaps just a couple of general points. you talked about the difference between a traffic reduction exercise and a traffic displacement exercise. A key part of the idea is to make alternatives to the car more attractive and more readily available, and therefore to contribute to reducing traffic overall. So I hope it is not just a case of taking traffic that is currently going in one direction and putting it in another direction. I hope that it is also a case of some of that traffic using alternative modes. Um, uh, Clearly, the impact of the Hythe Bridge Street closure on where traffic that originates in Jericho then goes is something that would have to be monitored and looked at very carefully. And I mentioned at the beginning, something I'm very keen on is to take a holistic view of North Oxford as a whole. Um, I think this is something that we haven't done, that councils haven't done. We've clearly got two major roads going parallel to each other, with cross streets and side streets, and then rivers on either side. So it is a sort of closed system, if you like. And the way that it operates has never really been planned as a whole. And I think we've got an opportunity to think about that. So I've slightly ducked your question, as you probably realised. but I mean, certainly the intention is not to increase traffic leaving Jericho just simply by a different route.
Yeah, I understand that. I think the traffic filter is a mixed traffic reduction and traffic displacement scheme, and perhaps none of us really know the balance. My fear, my intuition is it is more traffic displacement when we just think about Jericho and Walton Manor, and that's what I'm thinking about right now, as opposed to the broader and very well-intentioned things. Can I just quickly move on to a couple of things? And I think the ZEZ will definitely be traffic displacement. If there's a South Walton Street ZEZ that does not encompass the whole of Jericho and Walton Manor, it'll choke because the traffic that can't go out South Walton Street is fossil fuel cars, which are most of the cars, and they will go up north. Your planners, by the way, say that it is not forecast there will be major traffic displacement, and that concerns me because they didn't forecast that with the Walton Street closure a few years ago. So coming on to monitoring, and I asked this question at the Wesley Hall recently. Because I and the people I talk to and represent have great fears about traffic displacement into North Walton Street and then the Walton Manor side streets. Can I ask whether you will or have plans to monitor traffic in North Walton Street and then the individual roads of Observatory, St Bernard's and Leckford, so before the changes and after? And then the supplementary is your planners have said there won't be displacement, which I'm afraid I'm going to take as a promise, though a promise I don't believe will initially be implemented. But let's suppose I'm right. And to be honest, I'm often wrong. But let's suppose I'm right. And basically, the Walton Street closure crisis repeats itself. Can I be assured, firstly, that the council will react quickly, by which I mean within 2 or 3 months, not 18 months? And secondly, that the council will act to completely remove that devastating result for us?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I mean, again, you're going to tell me off for giving a politician's answer, but I simply can't prejudge what a future cabinet might decide to do on the basis of evidence that we don't yet have. I simply don't know. In terms of will we monitor specific places? Again, there will be monitoring. I don't want to, if you don't mind, say on the record exactly where monitoring stations will be, because I don't know the answer to that. I can certainly undertake to find out and let you know and make that public, but I don't have that information to hand at the moment. Just will the council react if the monitoring shows effects that are not right? the ETRO is a legal instrument, which is a live, real-time monitoring and consultation exercise of something while it happens, and it has sort of cut-off points, break points, if you like, written into it as a legal instrument, which are 6 months. So that, exactly as I've just said about the East Oxford LTNs, that is, the most obvious way to deal with issues which emerge. But again, that is entirely a matter for a future cabinet to decide on the basis of the evidence that is in front of it at the time. Just going back to the question about traffic displacement, let's not forget this point about residence exemptions. And that is exactly what that is designed to do. It's designed to allow, if you like, a little bit of a sort of a pressure valve, so that by careful use of your 100 exemptions a year, you can drive out of Walton Street and go south and west, but not every day. And our experts have done modelling to show that will deliver the benefits that we want, but mitigate against exactly the kind of disbenefits that you've outlined.
Andrew, a short, sharp question from you, please, because we have to move on. And might I also ask, what has the Anchor Forum achieved in 18 months? Not Andrew, Patrick, rather. Patrick.
Well, I've just joined the Anchor Forum. I think Bernadette has been a long-standing member, and I've been a member just for a few months. I actually think it's achieved a great deal. It allows a lot of different groups to talk to each other and test in a broader forum with people with differing views, their views and their possible plans. So it actually helps bond the community together. And I think that's really important, John. So have we achieved it? We're not in power. So we can't achieve any substantive change. But we do influence each other, we listen to each other, and we understand each other better. And I hope that allows us to together create a better neighbourhood. So I'm going to give thumbs up for the Anchor Forum. I think it's wonderful.
What concrete have you achieved in 18 months? I see no extra signs, no extra traffic calming. Bernadette, what have you achieved in 18 months?
John, that's the responsibility of the council. I think you're looking to the wrong people, with respect, of course, John.
Okay. Bernadette, do you want to bang the drum for the Anchor Forum?
Well, it's like Patrick just said, that it has brought the community together. It was very divided, and there is the risk that it will become divided again once if these bus gates or traffic filters go in. And so it has there has been some common ground which we've all agreed on, and the sort of main focus of that is that we all agree that there should be some kind of traffic calming measures. If that is something like we've heard that there are traffic lights which can be permanently on green for pedestrians and red for motorists. So if you come down there trying to cut through, going somewhere, and you're not a Jericho resident, you're not a visitor, or you're not coming to one of our amazing shops, then you'll see a whole bank of red lights and think, gosh, I'm not going to go down Walton Street again. So, that there are all of those things, and the chicanes which we've mentioned, the road narrowing and that kind of thing, which will make it a better environment. And I did hear a while ago that Alex Hollingsworth was hoping for some funding for some traffic calming, but this would be, for most of us, it would be something instead of, rather than as well as, the bus gate.
Okay, let's move on. Andrew, can you give them some hope for Walton Street? They've been talking in the Anchor Forum. You're in power. What are you going to do for them?
Yeah, well, I must say it's been extremely interesting to me to hear so much emphasis on traffic calming and speed on Walton Street. I have to confess I hadn't understood the extent to which that is an issue, and it clearly is, and that's of great interest. And I'd like to know more about that. I mean, obviously there are already chicanes at the top end of Walton Street, up by the junction with St Bernard's Road, and further north of that in Kingston Road. So, it'd be great to know exactly what you have in mind. Do you mean further south than that, towards the medical centre and OUP around there? Is that where that's an issue? Don't have to have this conversation now, but just let me know. And if Alex, as the local member, um, wants that, then let's have a proposal. I mean, in part of my role, I deal with things like putting in zebra crossings and chicanes and pedestrian refuges and things like that all the time, often in response to new developments. So the function of a road changes. It's perfectly possible to do that. So let's have that conversation about what you would like.
So your non-politician's answer is give us a proposal and we'll think about it, correct?
Well, look, I mean, there's then a process. A case has to be made for it, and we have experts in the county council who will assess the safety issues and the performance issues and cost. Let's be honest about these things. Budgets have to be used appropriately, but absolutely, it is the policy of the county council to prioritise pedestrians right at the top. Pedestrians, we talk about cyclists a lot, but actually pedestrians are at the top of that hierarchy. So if we can make it easier for people to get from one side of Walton Street to the other by holding up cars, that absolutely aligns with our priorities. So yeah, let's talk about it.
Gowher, you have been very, very patient. You're the only real person on this panel. You're not a politician. You don't represent, but you actually live in Jericho. What questions do you have?
Let me first thank Andrew and others for really, as a layperson who doesn't know anything about how traffic is managed, etc., except that I use it, I was very, very impressed at the amount of thought and innovations that are taking place. And on the whole, Andrew, I'm a very, very satisfied customer. So I congratulate you and I applaud you for the work that you are doing. Uh, I must admit that I have found, having lived in many parts of the world, that traffic planning in Oxford is probably one of the most difficult, and yet it has been very, very innovatively handled in many places. I remember way back in the late 70s, early 80s, about the Headington roundabout, which links to A40. We used to have terrible jams there. And today I find that roundabout is probably the most imaginative traffic arrangement I have seen anywhere in the world. So obviously, much has been done, and we are all very, very grateful. Just one layman's observation. I think the modeling that you are doing and also the data that you are collecting probably will need to be will need to take into account the behavioral changes that have taken place as a result of the our pandemic experience. Today, we are all concerned by increase in traffic, but at least in Jericho, where I live, much of the increased and people who speed in excess of the 20 miles limit, and I think 20 miles on side roads is much too high a limit. It could be brought down to 15 or to 10, are these people from delivery agencies. A great deal of the traffic comes from them. So we need to take that into account. How uh, we can have the best of both home deliveries, and at the same time control them. Also, Bernadette, obviously you are a great expert, and you've been dealing with these things, the businesses, for such a long time. I'm an occasional visitor to East Oxford, occasional, uh, uh, say not more than once a month, perhaps. I must say I'm very impressed by all the arrangements that have been made, And it certainly, if I were a resident there, I would be tremendously, tremendously happy. Yes, the businesses are suffering, but I think the business people will also have to take into account what I was saying about if their business has gone down, they must take into account, are they now providing delivery services in ways in which uh, uh, people now accustomed to telling, I'm in a meeting. That was my
Okay.
granddaughter who was just coming to call me. Uh,
Can you perhaps ask a question at some point
yeah.
soon, please? We've run out of time.
Oh, sorry. I will get. So anyway, thank you. As you can see, I'm very, very happy with what is happening. My one concern for the future is the building of the Schwarzman Center.
Mhm.
When we talked in this program with the people concerned in Schwarzman, we were told that it would not have any impact on the traffic. Now, I cannot believe that is possible to build such a large concert hall, which we welcome and we really are looking forward to it, but without additional, things. Will that be a possibility?
Mm.
To look
So
into
will
it.
the county or the city force the Schwartzman to have some car parking? Because the answer given to
Or,
us was
or some regulations more than the car park. And when my good friend John called you anti-car, I must tell you, if somebody had told me anti-car, I would take that as a compliment. Because we ought to be anti-car, provided we can have. My other question is for you: is there anything we can do to facilitate north-south link between Oxford? That seems to me quite a problem. Every time I'm going to the railway station or towards the south, which is not often, but each time it has been a serious problem.
Mm.
So, can we think of uh, the side roads, not the main roads, the speed limit being lowered from 20 to possibly 10? Because 20 is very high in this congested road with cars on both sides. And when people are crossing the road or animals are crossing the road, drivers do not normally see it. So, with
sorry
those
to
two
come
questions, let me
sorry
end.
to come over all Krishna and Murthy, but we've got 3 minutes left. Andrew, short, sharp answers, please.
Okay, 10 miles an hour. I don't know. I'm not aware of that having been done anywhere, so I don't know whether that would be something that our experts would recommend. North-south connectivity, yeah, absolutely. Not least for buses. It is an often remarked that to get from one side of the city to the other by bus, you often have to change and then walk up Cornmarket or whatever it might be. If anybody's got an easy solution to that one, that would be great. It would be a brave politician that proposed reopening Cornmarket to buses, although maybe if the trade-off is better connectivity, we ought to be prepared to look at that. The Schwartzman Centre, that's a matter for the planning authority. My feeling is that it should indeed be perfectly possible for a facility like that right in the city centre to operate without significant amounts of car parking. There'd be some, obviously, for service, disabled parking and that kind of thing. But the Sheldonian is a concert hall, has no parking, works okay. There's no parking for the new theatre or the playhouse. Um, so it should be possible. Deliveries, yes, absolutely. This what is known as sort of last mile planning is really key, and it's very good to see innovative businesses like Pedal and Post and others uh, getting out of vans, because clearly, particularly during the pandemic and with the rise of online shopping, we've all got very used to ordering things, which then arrive by somebody driving around in a very complicated route. Are there ways of consolidating deliveries at some sort of center, some sort of hub on the ring road, which are then brought in a different way? These are all things we need to think about very carefully.
So Cinderella, the coach is waiting for me on the hour. Just to say, Andrew, thank you very much for giving your time and being honest, and indeed for everybody else. Coming up on My Jericho later in the autumn, Professor Danny Dorlin. who always attracts a huge audience, who's never afraid of being controversial. He's going to do a session on car wars on 17th of November in St Barnabas. Book for it. Go onto the My Jericho website. There's probably 10 events between now and Christmas. You can book straight through now just by one click, and that will take you through. But meanwhile, the traffic has entertained us, or it's been a fascinating discussion for the last hour. See you next time, and thank you all for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.